The other statement I wish to make, Mr. Speaker, in my capacity as CARICOM lead head with respect to matters of health. And the focus of this really is on our achievement of an 80% vaccination coverage by our adults. It is with pleasure that I announce that as of Tuesday, I should first say that 80% target that we had given ourselves for all persons over 18 to become vaccinated, that is, to have at least their first shot, that was realized on Friday, the 26th of November. As of Tuesday, which is yesterday, the 30th of November, 80.2% of the adults 18 years and older have taken their first dose of the vaccines, and 73.8% of the adult population are now fully vaccinated in St. Kitts and Nevis. Those are the global stats, yes, of which we can be proud, the achievement of a significant milestone. This milestone, Mr. Speaker, would not have been possible without our hard work and the dedicated support given by the Honourable Minister of Health, the Honourable Akila Byron-Nisbet, our healthcare workers, and the well-informed scientific, medical and technical advice given by our health experts on both islands. We are indebted to them for rising to the call of duty in this time of national crisis and for serving with this distinction. I thank them all for putting country above self and doing all within their power to get us through the last 20 months. Of course, constructive support was also provided by all the other agencies of the government. And though health is at the forefront, this would not have been achieved, for example, without our security forces doing what is necessary to ensure the observations of the non-pharmaceutical elements of the health plan were being observed. It would not have been possible, of course, without our citizens and residents responding with the adoption of those measures and coming forward in 2021 to become vaccinated. It was a truly all-of-society approach that got us to this point in this fight where we can see now a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. I want to commend to the instrumentality of our National Task Force in COVID-19 for their work, and all the members of that team drawn from the islands of St. Kitts and Nevis. It has been a team effort. Additionally, we continue to expand the vaccination coverage in our 12 to 17-year-olds, with 14.2% of them having taken their first dose and 11.9% fully vaccinated. The numbers are growing, but we will certainly like to see a larger uptake in the number of persons, students in particular, who would have taken the vaccination, or the vaccines rather. There is no room for complacency in this regard, and I therefore appeal to the parents and guardians who did the right thing and protected themselves by getting vaccinated to not leave our children, their children, unprotected and vulnerable to this deadly virus. I encourage you then to take your children of the requisite age, that is 12 years and over, to the nearest health center to get them vaccinated. This is critical. We have lived the experience of too many of our schools in the Federation having to be closed because of uncertainty with respect to the transmission of the virus within our schools. And we can't repeat that experience again. The best way to prevent a repeat of that experience is by getting as many persons, adults, 12 years and over, vaccinated. If we look briefly, we will see that in St. Kitts, we have 84.8% of all adults who would have taken their first dose. And according to the data provided by our Chief Medical Officer to Cabinet yesterday, 77.1% of all adults on St. Kitts are fully vaccinated. On Nevis, we have 68.2% of all adults there having taken their first dose and 65% fully vaccinated. Of course, we need to play our part, all of us, in this fight, as no one is safe until everyone is safe. I therefore urge again all who are eligible to be vaccinated to go forward and vaccinate, as the vaccines give the best protection against severe disease, hospitalization, and death. The vaccines also significantly reduce your risk of catching and spreading the disease. Mr. Speaker, and last week, Leadership Matters, which I hosted, I announced that certain changes would be instituted if we made it to the 80% threshold of population immunity. So Tuesday, I indicated should we and when we arrive, some 5 significant changes would follow. Friday, we achieved that. On Sunday, the 28th of November, the World Health Organization announced a new variant called the Omicron. This variant has caused many countries to review their policies regarding the management of COVID-19. Some, like the United States of America and some states in the European Union, have imposed travel bans and reimposed other restrictions in an attempt to contain the spread. The experts have said that there is still a lot we need to learn about this new variant regarding its transmissibility, severity, and, of course, the efficacy of the current vaccines and treatment against this new variant. Our health experts advised Cabinet yesterday that we should put a pause on some of the proposed measures which had been noted on Tuesday's Leadership Matters, specifically some of the measures that we had proposed then in light of the situation with the Omicron variant. We were asked to put those on a temporary pause. We were reminded that we are dealing still with a deadly virus that keeps mutating. And we listen to the news, we hear there are over 30 mutations of the virus. And we therefore must continue to adjust our strategy and to be nimble with it. In other words, nothing will be cast in stone because we are learning as we get along with respect to the virus. We will therefore, like the rest of the world, opt to obtain more information on the Omicron variant over the next 7 to 14 days to further guide our decision-making process. Of the 5 measures that we had proposed in consultation with the health experts, 2 of them we were advised that we should put on pause. And the 2 of the 5 that we put on pause would be 1, the removal of the barriers at Port Zante, which have been established principally to protect our citizens and residents by allowing the passengers to move in a bubble. Given we do not know enough, and the scientific community does not yet know enough regarding the Omicron variant, we are being advised that we should hold firm in the maintenance of the barriers for a while longer. Within the next 7 to 14 days, it is expected that additional data will become available to the scientific community and the global community at large, and further decisions could be taken as to what we will have to do generally and specifically with respect to the barriers. In other words, if we are to protect ourselves from the unknown, we must maintain to the extent possible the concept of a bubble operation at our port. I have no need to remind you, but reminder is better than instruction, that the bulk of the tourists who comes here, they are coming from source markets like the USA, which has already found the existence of the Omicron variant. We do not know how widespread. And as I said, we do not know yet how it will respond to existing vaccines that are available. So we are just being cautious with respect to that one, and we continue to say life first strategy. We continue to appeal for wisdom. We continue to say to our people, do not test faith. Do not test faith. And we are proceeding in a cautious manner. The second measure that remains in place is that a negative PCR test will remain the standard for persons to enter our federation. All persons 12 and over who are fully vaccinated with a negative PCR test, which must be taken within 72 hours of arrival, will continue to be required to have a negative PCR test before being released from quarantine. Again, you must be fully vaccinated if you are a tourist, and you must come in with the gold standard of tests, the negative PCR test, and you will undergo the quarantine and release once you get your negative PCR test. We believe that it is prudent and advisable and safe that those 2 measures that were previously being put in the public domain as targets, objectives we could achieve, goals we could fulfill, an achieving of 80% based on the advice of our local experts and generally the body that is available to the scientific community. We would want those measures to put on a temporary halt for a period of 7 to 14 days. Why that period? That is the period which the scientific community has said will allow them further evidence and data from, say, for example, South Africa, to be able to make further analyses regarding the variant. What we are able to pursue would be these three measures. One, all vaccinated tourists arriving, whether by cruise or air, with a negative PCR test can now move freely with access to all tourist sites, beaches, etc. In other words, you can go to Brimstone Hill, you can go to all the designated tourist sites once you are fully vaccinated. And it doesn't matter whether you are cruise or you're coming by air. We are treating the vaccinated tourists that would have come with their negative PCR test in a similar manner in terms of their access to touristic sites in the country. They, of course, will have to abide by the non-pharmaceutical protocols. Personal responsibility is still at the core of this fight, and all our citizens and residents have an obligation to continue to use the non-pharmaceutical measures intended for their protection. The wearing of masks, the frequent cleaning of hands, the social and physical distancing where applicable should all continue to be maintained. The second measure that we had outlined on leadership matters and which we are in a position to execute is that entertainers will now be able to undertake mass events for fully vaccinated persons with a capacity of 75%. That is 75% space capacity. The notion or the concept of space capacity has been something that we have been applying for some time. With the advice of the Commissioner and the task force, the spacing limitations have been determined, so the execution of this should not be problematic. The third measure that we will proceed with is that the quarantine period for unvaccinated or partially vaccinated will now be reduced from 14 days to 9 days. The quarantine period will, for unvaccinated or partially vaccinated, meaning you would have only taken one dose of an approved vaccine, will be reduced from 14 days to 9 days. Again, we have heard from those who are charged with the responsibility of managing, if you will, the entry into the country, that we have quite a number of our nationals, some of them elderly, who had gone abroad for treatment and somehow got, as it were, stuck overseas. And they are concerned about having to undergo a prolonged period of quarantine. The health experts, having looked at the data, having looked at practices elsewhere, have determined that we can reduce the quarantine for the unvaccinated to a 9-day period without creating any issues for the rest of the population. This, we hope, will allow more of our people to return home from abroad and to return in time to enjoy their Christmas in St. Kitts and Nevis. The three measures that I've outlined just now will be implemented effective Friday, the 3rd of December, 2021. I should say that there was a meeting of the National COVID-19 Task Force on Saturday last with all the relevant agencies. They looked at the circumstances, what was needed and what had to be done, and they had indicated that this date would give them sufficient time to make the necessary adjustments. So, for example, where changes need to be made to the program with respect to our travel forms, they have enough time to be able to do this. Where we need to, for example, add more kiosks or booths in relation to the immigration services, I'm advised that those responsible have said that this date will give them enough time to do the things properly. Now, having regard to the global attention that is being given to the new variant, the Omicron variant, and what has been the experience elsewhere, the application of the banning of travel from South Africa and from a number of South African countries. What has been the advice? First, the advice from the World Health Organization indicates that the WHO does not support travel bans at this particular time, and it has advised that the travel bans in place are unlikely to stop the spread of the variant. Of course, we see that although it was reported in South Africa, it has now found itself elsewhere, and it has been reported in at least 22 other countries, including Canada and the United Kingdom and the USA. So this is where we are at. We have always said in St. Kitts and Nevis that we will follow the science and we will follow the advice of authoritative bodies, respected bodies on health matters. The premier one is the WHO, the World Health Organization. Our health team has advised that it is not necessary at this time to impose a travel ban on South Africa or on the South African countries. We will follow what the WHO prescribed in place of travel bans. One, the WHO has recommended that countries continue to implement the effective public health measures to reduce COVID-19 circulation overall, using a risk analysis and science-based approach. Further, countries should increase their public health and medical capacities to manage an increase in cases. Accordingly, we in St. Kitts and Nevis will continue our public health measures that have kept us safe thus far and continue to push our vaccination coverage, as this provides the best protection. Just this morning, traveling and listening to the news, the head of the WHO, Dr. Tedros, was again, when asked, how do people protect themselves? They were not in favor of travel bans and all these. He said, vaccination, vaccination. The people must get themselves vaccinated. It still remains our most powerful tool against every variant of the COVID-19 that has come so far. And so again, we want to encourage everyone who is able to get himself or herself vaccinated. We want to repeat our appeal to those who are on the front line, our nurses, our doctors, our police officers, those in the defense force, in fact, anyone, whether in the public or the private sector, engaged in frontline activity, however defined, they are at the risk being in the front line. And therefore, we advise that they protect themselves as much as possible. And the best tool in this fight against a virus that had killed millions of persons is the vaccination. We are aware that before this variant, the Delta variant was described as being the most transmissible and perhaps the most deadly of all the variants that had come. We have to protect ourselves here, and we anticipate. Up to yesterday, our chief medical officer indicated that we do not have Delta in circulation. They do regular tests to ascertain what variant is at play. We do not have the Delta, but it is probable that Delta will come. It is only a matter of time. So long as our borders are open, so long as persons are coming from countries that have the Delta, the probability exists. And that is why it still remains true that none of us is safe until all of us is safe. Imagine all the way yonder in South Africa, a new variant has come in vogue, come on the scene, but he has consequences for all of us. America placed a ban in some 8 countries, said he wanted to shut out that variant, but it's already there. Usually when you find out is after the fact. And so this is part of the challenge. And this is why personal responsibility and sensitivity becomes important if we are going to defeat the virus, if we are going to come out of the shadow of the COVID-19. And while it is challenging, the interesting point, though, is that the power lies in each of us to protect ourselves. The interesting thing is that the vaccines are free. Getting ill would be costly for the health system, for employers, for families, for everyone. I would want us to set as a target that we will try to achieve near 100% coverage of all adults. For none of us is safe until all of us are safe. It only takes one person going to a bar, coming into our church, intermingling with us. And that is why we have to set the target high, so that we reduce to a minimum the probability that we will have a spread. If we were to achieve such a desirable goal, challenging goal, it will be a remarkable feat for us as the smallest country in the hemisphere to have achieved a near 100% coverage of all adults. 33,000 plus of us going forward and protected ourselves. That will be another beautiful citation, because the WHO has already cited us as being the first country in the sub-region to have achieved the critical target of 40% vaccination coverage of the entire population. St. Kitts and Nevis was first. I want to ensure that we work hard to make St. Kitts and Nevis the most protected of all countries when it comes to the COVID-19. We must aim to make our space the safest place to live, to work, to do business, and to raise children. The benefits of such a status will be a significant boost to our way of life, our tourism industry, job creation, higher income in the country, and greater opportunities to all. Clearly, we will be one bold step closer to the stronger and safer future, the future we aspire to, and the future, with God's help, the people of St. Kitts and Nevis deserve. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the indulgence.